So welcome today to episode 4 of the 3D Print Doctor. We've got a couple of people online. Most people seem to be watching the recording of the show and getting their information that way. And today we're going to be looking at 3D modelling, trying to reduce failures, a few little things to do with printers, etc. And we'll work through those and see if we can get few things sorted out for everyone so that they're not having some problems if they are. One area that I have just had a couple of issues with people that have received their printers and only got into them, and yes, I was off for a few weeks, so I missed last week, is some funny jammings when people are trying to calibrate their printers. Now, one's out at Cherrybrook and another one's at somewhere else, yet their other printer is printing. If you've had any issues like this, or you haven't even started your printers up yet and you're just trying to find it, I'm assuming, and I haven't had a chance to check these people yet, but I'm thinking there might be some tape or packing tape because these are the first ones that have gone out and they may have missed them in the factories when they set them up to send them out. Check that there's no tape or packing foam still left on the printer if you're having any movement problems with the carriage on your printer. It's a really easy one. If you turn it on and it chatters really loudly, there's a blockage somewhere. Now, if there's no packaging or anything else, the best thing is get in touch with me. We'll try and do a chat, look through the printer, see if I can see what the issue is. It might be simple. If not, it might be one of those sort of dead on arrivals. With this first fleet, we checked them out pretty thoroughly when we went through them, but we couldn't check every single one because there was hundreds of them. I'll post a photo and show you the how many there were in the factory when we did them. It was a huge ask, but we'll go through it. Just little things like that we'll have a check with. There can be some issues with it when they're packaged out. So today what I'm going to be looking at, we're going to mainly be looking at, I'm going to share my screen today now, and we're mainly going to be looking at things like how to maximise and build the best prints when you're working with your kids in things like Tinkercad, and then how you can lay out things on the slicer, the FlashPrint software, to minimise the amount of handling that you might do with a bunch of class sets of things. It's interesting when I've been out and not everybody sort of thinks of doing multiple prints on the one print to sort of save yourself a bit of time. But when somebody answers, you go, of course you could do that. You just don't think about it at the time. So I'm going to stick to Tinkercad, but I will introduce another one for you for those that are a little bit more adventurous. But Tinkercad's where we have all of the previous videos, etc., sitting on the STEM.T4L website, and all the learning units relate around Tinkercad. It's freely available. We can log it in and it's safe for the kids to use. So it's the main reason we use it. It can be a little tricky to use and it can be a little limiting when I look at it for a full-blown CAD program, but there's a whole pile of workarounds. So this first one here is an interesting one. So I was just looking at how you would build something in Tinkercad and then orientate it for printing. And so we're going to take this model and move it over. But you'll notice that there's a difference between these two models. And the reason why there's a difference between them is that I made them differently. And so what I'm going to do now is show you how each one is made slightly differently. And go through Tinkercad and you will find kids will have a ball just going through videos to work out how to use it. I do find, and I have admitted quite happily, Tinkercad doesn't work in my head really well. I'm used to using something like the CAD program that I use, which is Onshape. It's more about measuring and a bit more like drafting, and so it makes sense in my head. This thing with a block, I can use it, but I struggle with it. So this particular one at the back one is probably the way you would do it. You've got an object where you need to have two, let's call them flanges sitting on the side. And I would simply just drop in a block. Let me make that a bit bigger so you can see it. And then we're going to actually add these two flanges on the side. And so one way of doing it would be grab this one here. Let's drop in another block. And you will find you can align these the first time out like I just did. You'll find you'll get a little 3D image that kicks in and lets you lock it in. If it doesn't do that, you select both of them and use the aligning tool, which I'll show you in a minute how to use that. Now, once I've got this here, let me move it over so we can see it. I now want to actually change the size of this. I'm going to actually make the vertical one at the back. And so I'm going to actually just simply reduce the size. And I always find it weird that I select this one to get this measurement. But oh well, this doesn't work in my head. And I'm going to make that 5, and then that will reduce back. So this one's got my little vertical flange that's going up the top. And I'm just going to do the same sort of thing here to get the horizontal one at the top. Now this you can see, because I've already got one in place, doesn't want to align. So I'm just going to drop it into place. It hasn't aligned because it hasn't gone down to the bottom line. Okay, now let's see if we can align this by selecting it. And now I'm going to go up to the align tool, and you'll get these funny little dots. And the best way I can look at it is, and what I want to do is select only those two. So if I select one, control, and then the other, no, shift, come on. Okay, we've got them two now, because I only want to align these two. I don't want to align this one. You will find that you can get these dots, and you'll find, see, this one will move into that position. That will align there. It'll pop it into place. I'm going to go with this one to start off with. No, it's moved the wrong one. Can be a bit of a trick. This is the one that I want to move. Let's see if I can get it to work that way. I'm going to have to lock it in quite easily. Go there. I'll align this one. That's pretty good there at the moment, and I'll align this one differently later. Let me move him back by himself. Yep. Okay. And then this one is still not aligned perfectly. It's got to go up. And these are the things that I have problems working with Tinkercad. I find it a little bit frustrating. I'd like to just drop in measurements there. And it's still not perfectly aligned yet. I want to move this one over. Yeah, I have to actually align that one now. Okay, it's not going to work perfectly. This one here now, I'm going to change the height of, which is this measurement. I'm going to make it 5. And then I'm going to drag it up using the arrow tool to the top, and then I can create my L. It's not as well as I did it over here, but it's the way we can actually do it. Easier way, this one here. So I'm going to drop in a rectangle again, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make it twice as long to get my 40. And then I'm going to simply put in a cube here, but I'm going to remove that cube from its location. So let's drop in another cube, or I can throw in a blank or a remove cube here. Either way, there would be an easy way to do this. I could have grabbed another block, changed the color so I can see it, and then you can change it to a hole. Now, what I want to do here is actually just make this one here shorter. So I'm going to make it shorter by, let's say, 5 millimeters, or alternatively, you can simply just lower it into position, but it's easier if you actually make it smaller. Let's get this one, we'll make it 15. And then we will make the other top measurement. Where are you? Make this also 15. And now I've got that. I'll realign it, and then I'll slide it into position. And now what I do is that I select both of them, group them, and now we're in a position where we've got rid of that little section. And as you can see, it's much easier to do this than it is to do this. Now, why you're looking at those sorts of things is sort of the things that I'm looking at. I'm going to get rid of this one because it's not a good one anyhow. Is when you're trying to do chamfers or put curves on the edges of some of your objects, Tinkercad has a bit of difficulty with that. I could grab this now and I can select the whole lot and I can put a radius on it, but it puts a radius on every corner. To smooth those out, use the steps, because that will give you a curve. This will give you like faceted edges, and you can see those faceted edges starting to appear there. So if you want to have a really smooth curved finish, you can do it like so. If you want to make it like a chamfer, then you make it one and you get a chamfer on the edge. So there's different ways of actually doing those particular curves, but you can't individually do one edge. There is a little trick that you can use, and this is the little one here that I found, which was interesting. There's a video that I think I have put on, or I will put on for you to actually be able to look at. Where is that video? It's on another. Is that it? No, that's a different one again. There's a video available, which I'll put a post on for you, that shows you how to do this. But basically what you've got to do is create an object that you can then slide into the corner and then remove that one edge. So this one here, as you can see, I've created it. And when I actually group that, done that. Z, get them up. And group. You're annoying me. Oh God, it's gone completely the other way now. Interesting. I'll go back a step. That should be able to get rid of it, and then it will actually take it away. Why have you done that? You should be able to. You're a whole. Now group. No. Isn't that lovely when things don't work the way they did the last time when you did it as an example? So why I've had to do this is I've had to create this particular hole here to remove the object here, and it doesn't want to play with me. The particular unit that I looked with the video, what it did, these were shapes that were available for you to get in. It's the only way I can see how you can do an individual chamfer or a fillet on the end of on a single edge. But they had access to a library. We don't have that access to the library, so it's a rather tricky one. So have a look at that video. I'll put the post up there for it's a way of doing a fillet. Otherwise, you are limited to doing fillets on every edge. Now, if you try to do a fillet on all the edges with this one, here's the tricky bit here, and I've segmented it out. If I try to do the fillet here, or the radius, it does it on each individual object. Now, this might be something that works for when you're actually designing things. So have a look at the way you're working it. Now, if I was doing something here in Onshape, I would be able to create my sketch, select my plane, and I do it by creating my object, and then I can do my 40 by 40 square, and then I extrude up to 40 to get my cube. And if I want to put a fillet on one edge, I just select that one edge, and I can actually change the size of it to whatever size fillet I want. And if I wanted to put a chamfer on another edge, I simply select it and I can put a chamfer on another edge nice and easily just by selecting the edges. So a true CAD program gives you much more finite control over what you can do, but there is a steep learning curve. Onshape, for example, is freely available online for educators and students. You do have to create an account. It is a brilliant, it's completely online and it's sitting in a browser. You don't have to install anything, and it's one of the main tools that I use. So once you get used to the SketchUp or the Tinkercad, and you reach those limits, Onshape is another good one. There's also one now called FreeCAD, which I'm looking at trying to have a bit of a play with. So that will be another one which would be worthwhile looking at. Now, another one that I was looking at was people are looking at how you would do make your printing more efficient. So the typical unit, learning unit that's available, we've got the little tags that you will make with your kids. And I'll go through that just really quickly as well for you, just to show you how I've knocked that up, is just create yourself a little rectangle, change the sizes. Now you can either drag these out and just be very fluid with the way the design comes together if you want to. And then in this instance, I can put a small radius on it if I want, just to get a bit of a curve with it. Okay. Next thing I want to do is that I want to actually put a little hole through one corner. So I'll create that hole there and I'll make it, let's say, a 4mm diameter hole. And let's get this one here as well. And then I'll orientate it in the corner. And I don't mind it being longer than the unit itself or the little tag that I'm trying to create. And then I will grab some text and I will drop it over the top of this and then resize it to fit the space that I've created. And always do a check down from the top. It's one of the things that I will emphasize a lot, is it's the only way to actually move. Now, interesting thing here that will come up. I'm using a mouse. This sort of manipulation, I will state straight up, is really difficult if you're just using a touchpad on a laptop. Really hard. Get a mouse, you will use all three buttons. I'm using the right button now to rotate and spin. I'm using the middle button to move, and then I can select with my left button to be able to do what I need to do. Now, to select objects. Now, the text here is too high, so I need to actually make it shorter. And the one thing that I would always check is I would look along this line here and make sure that I don't have this situation where your text is not touching the top of your base material. And in fact, I tend to always have it sit inside a little bit, get a bit of overlap. So we've got this set up now. I can get my text, I can dive up here and I can change the text over. Usually it lets you change the text. Oh, I don't know why you do that. I don't want to measure anything. Change it now. No. Go away. Right. Okay, let's get the text. See if it lets me change it now. There we go. Double click it. That'll drop that in. And you can also, with the text, put a little bit of curvature on that as well. So once you've got that out, you then want to be in a position where you're going to print it. So let's move over to the FlashPrint software and have a look at that. And in the FlashPrint software, I'm going to load it up. Where is it? Is it this one? Here we go. Okay. You may find that you get this repair model when you go into FlashPrint software occasionally. Just click on it because there's something that the print software doesn't understand on your object, and it's sitting and saying, well, I can fix it if you let me. Now, you will have times when you've got all 30 of your kids sitting in a classroom, all making tags, and they all want to see them in 5 seconds flat. We have to go through the process of showing them that it takes a little while to print. Now, if I start slicing this particular unit here, and I'm just going to let it go, I don't want a raft on this one because it's got a nice big flat surface. And this one will take approximately, if I go to the preview, 30 minutes to print just this. And that's only about 60 by 30 millimeters and 5 millimeters thick. So it's still going to take 30 minutes to print. So that's going to take a while. But let's look at, and I haven't got a whole pile of different ones, but you could load by going file, load, file, load, file, load, a number of units. Now, I'm just going to duplicate what we have here, and I'm pretty sure I can go up to about, let's go 10. We should be able to go 10. Now, they are now spread out. I can put 10. I could probably go 12, actually. Let's go more. Too many. If you find little pink lines, you will find that you can delete those. I just put way too many on. And that now we should also be able to go to auto layout here on the right-hand side and put a 2 minute, and that will lay them in. We could put another one in there, obviously, now. But now I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. We could do 15, half the class. If they were 60 by 30, you could even go probably 70 by 30 and you go close to getting them all on here. You can go across the little grey line before the little pink ones will tell you that you can't fit it in. Now, if I slice this, same settings, I haven't changed the settings, it will take 30 times 14 to actually print it off. We're up to 7 hours. What you don't have to do is remove each of them 14 times. You let it print and let it go overnight. There's no problems with the printers working overnight. Leave them overnight, come in the morning, and then you can pop them off just by picking up removing the platform, flexing it, they'll all pop off. You can get the next one started. By the end of the day, with a bit of luck, all 30 of your class kids have got their tags sitting in their hot little hands ready to take home. So that's a way to actually maximise your printer. You've got 2 printers, and if you've got them in the same room, you could do 30 kids in an evening, have them both printing away, and off you go. So that's a real good little trick to maximise them. So to get more on, you simply just go file, load, and you get your kids to put them either in a USB, however you're going to get them on, and you put them on individually, and it'll accept a different print each time. So that's a really clever way to sort of maximise your printing. Now, an interesting issue that I also had, what were one of the other things? 3D free multiple objects, slicing tools. Oh, whoa, there was an interesting one there. I'll go back to that one. Where is it? There's a slicing tool available to you. Let me get out of the preview. Where is it hiding? Occasionally, the kids will download something that they want to print, and one of them it was a piano that had a platform on it, and it was just going to take a long time to print that plumber. You can cut things off inside of FlashPrint, and there is a slicing program called a cut here, and you can cut that off, and you can cut off objects in the plane. This is going to slice it through here. If I select this one, it'll go the other way. If you needed to minimize the thickness, you could actually slice a bit of the half of it, and then you keep one bit and you select it and delete it in FlashPrint itself. And it's a really clever way to sort of make something more efficient without having to go into Tinkercad or any of those. Now, you can do the same sort of thing in Tinkercad by loading an STL file into Tinkercad and then manipulating it there. And it's one of the things that Tinkercad does quite well that something like my Onshape program doesn't do as well, being able to manipulate an STL file that you've already had. So the slicing program is an interesting way of fixing things up if you want to actually modify something that you already have. I do encourage you not, however, to get kids downloading things from Thingiverse and Yegi, etc., because all you're doing is encouraging them to not do the modelling. Now, I have here an interesting one. We had one of the posts from David. Where's Dave? And I don't think Dave made it today. Dave Cowan had an issue with a print that he was doing, and this is the STL file that he sent down. And he said that about halfway through the print, it went into spaghetti mode. In other words, something's broken off. There's been an area that isn't printing, etc., and you end up with issues that you turn into spaghetti. And I will show you. I'll jump out in a second. I'll show you what spaghetti looks like. Now, I haven't had a huge amount of time to talk with Dave about it, and I don't think Dave's online. Is Dave online? No, it doesn't look like he is. The thing with spaghetti, and if this particular one came through, he said that he did use supports. However, when I look at the ring has a really small surface area on the platform, and I would expect it to detach quite easily. The feet of the elephant, even though they look like they're quite large, will cause a problem later on, because this is quite a big print area that you're printing. If you were to slice this, and I'll do a quick slice on it. If you were to slice this, this is one of the things that I do with teachers and kids, is that I look at the slice preview. Here is a really good way to teach. Come down to the bottom, and I have done this before. You can see how the printer will start to print. Now, they will print quite happily themselves. However, the trunk will be spaghetti because this trunk is sitting there in midair. If supports were used, it's more than likely not going to cause a problem. And I obviously here don't have raft, but it looks like I've got brim turned on when I did the slice, because that little blue area is a brim. Now I'm going to move up slightly. And in a second, here we have the belly starting to be produced. No supports, that belly is going to turn into spidering. And I'll show you an example of an elephant that I printed off and how it started to spider, or spaghetti, I call it. Now, when you get to here, even if it had supports, if the brimming, the blue part, or a raft was not used, there may not be enough adhesion between the feet and the print bed to stop any lateral movements from the printer nozzle moving the printer and then detaching it off, and then you end up with a bag of grapes or spaghetti, and it looks terrible. The brim down the bottom here, I would suspect without a brim or raft, that would detach very easily. And what can sometimes happen is the spaghetti builds up and then the print head drags it along and then starts knocking other objects off. So you end up with this conglomeration of issues trying to print, and you end up with a lot of problems. So in this instance here, you could print them all, but you would need some. I would use a brim, especially for this ring. These, I think, would have enough surface area to not have a problem, especially the dome here, but the dice one here would. I would not bother with any supports under here because there is enough area. See how the trunk's not touching? There's enough overhang here. You would find that if you went for auto supports, it would put them in, but it would not need them. The belly, however, definitely will need supports. So I would say what's ended up happening is that we've got to this point, and without a brim or a raft, you've ended up with a few little issues, and it's broken away at times. There can be some weird issues with some prints that have got faults within the STL that simply get to a point and then they start printing, or the print head moves. There's some issues with the actual STL. And that comes about when, if I go back to SketchUp, if you have not grouped all of your objects in SketchUp, you can have some major problems when you are printing. It's one of the things within SketchUp, Tinkercad, that you have to group any objects together so that they then are part of a full object. If you don't group them, you end up with some major problems. Okay, so that's that particular one then. I'm going to talk with Dave more and try and get him online actually, and then see what we're at. Now, what I'm going to do now is stop presenting, and I'm going to now turn my background off, and also try and switch the camera to after. Come on, next one. Come on. Yep. Right. Okay. Now, hopefully, this one will give you a bit of insight, and hopefully you can see it reasonably well. Now, that's spaghetti, and it's an interesting one because I did this today. I'm trying to print this particular object here. Now, this is something that I've designed. We have, and I think I've presented this before, we've got a couple of schools where the teachers want this power button made less accessible by some of their kids. So I've created this. This will slide over the top and you use a pen to get to the power button. Yep, the kids could probably still get there, but it's my first foray into it. We're trying to keep it simple. Now, what I have found is that I had to get rid of the back part of the plate there. So now what I've come up with is that I'm trying to print it without that backing plate, just using these two side flanges to hold it into place. That worked really well, except my print failed right at the end of the print. And here was the interesting thing. I had been off for 4 weeks, and this was the print bed that I was using. And I've redone it, and that one adhered just well enough and it stayed on. How did I cure it? I went for a brim on the other one as well. Still didn't stick. I used the isopropyl alcohol, cleaned the surface, and then it stuck really well. Now, this one has done quite a bit of printing. So it's picking up oil from my hands, from the objects out. I'm finding, especially with the FlashForge 4, that cleaning is a much better solution than using the 3D lac. The 3D lac tends not to stick to this stuff. So try and keep these surfaces nice and clean. I had to go for a brim on this, and you'll see, and I'll be able to peel that brim off nice and easily. And that's come off now, and now I'll be able to use that. And I'm going through, as you can probably see here, a number of iterations. I'm slowly getting, I think I'm up to number 5 at the moment. And I think with this one here, this will actually work for me. But it was registering that I had that issue. And I went to cleaning first rather than leveling because I was getting a nice print. It just wasn't sticking. So a couple of bucks spent down at Bunnings with some isopropyl alcohol, you will find probably will save you. Now I'm going to go back to David's elephant. Here's some interesting ones that I did. Here's an elephant, and good, you can see that. Here's an elephant, and I've used the tree supports. Now, areas that are really, really difficult to print in this instance are the trunk. It needs a little support, which I've broken off because they're so delicate. The tree supports are really cool. Now, the tusks, you're going to have to be very careful getting those supports off because the tusks themselves are really, really fine. You'll also possibly notice that the ears have not completely printed. This particular download of Thingiverse had some really nasty artifacts in the ears, and they were never going to print well. So critically look at anything you download. Not all the models are great, and especially anything that's an organic type model, I find are the most difficult things to print. Now, I can snip these off with a pair of side cutters, etc. I did put a raft on the bottom of this to give my elephant enough support. And then with a little bit of work, I could get a reasonable elephant print. Now, here is the same print with no supports. And remember I was talking about the spaghettiing, yes, I could, you can see it, the spaghettiing of the belly. Because there were no supports, I got this big spaghetti, and then it eventually fixed itself up and I got one. But he's got this big nasty mess underneath him. The trunk didn't even go close to producing. It had to wait until it was supported by the neck and part of the head, and then it could print, but none of the bottom part of the trunk printed because there was no support. So anything that's printing in the air, you have to have supports with. So that's just a few examples of tricks that you could use and things with Tinkercad that might be able to get you in a position where you're getting a few less failures. Now, the only other thing that I did want to do, and I will bring this one up, and I will get rid of all of these, and I wanted, let me just get rid of, what are you doing that for? Move, good. And what I wanted to do was orientation of a object when you're printing it. You can save yourself some time. So I'm going to load a file. Let me see if this is the one I wanted. Yeah. So this one here, when we had it orientated in Tinkercad, now why don't I actually present my screen so you can see what I'm doing here, otherwise you're looking at nothing. Okay. So this one here flipped it for me. This is the best orientation. But if you remember, when we had it in where are we? When we had it in Tinkercad, it was orientated this way. Now, if I was trying to print it this way, I would definitely have to put supports underneath it. But when you got this into your slicing software, the FlashPrint software, the easiest system here to do would be to flip it over, put the big flat side down. And now what you will find is you will get a beautiful print because you've got a nice big flat surface under here. This doesn't need any supporting. This void will support beautifully. You've got no problem. So think about how you're going to orientate your prints when they land. The organic prints are difficult. I remember showing you the one which was the pelvis. That's one of those impossible prints. You're just going to have to wear the time and the supports that you have to add to it. And also put down some rafts or brims if you really find that there's nothing touching. But something like this, you spin. You could also print this very easily. Not that one, go back. You could print it very easily in this orientation as well. That would print really well, this being the flat area. If you were to print this way, it would take approximately twice as long than if it was lying flat. The more layers, vertical layers you have with a 3D print, the longer it takes. It can print a big flat area much faster than it can print many vertical slices. So think of that. Keep your height low when possible when you're laying out your prints, because it will print quicker than a tall vertical object. Also, you will find that you've got shear planes across here that will give you the ability, it could crack on you at some point in time if you put a load in a shear plane. So sometimes you've got to orientate for strength as well. So there's a whole pile of things that you need to look at. So it's complicated, but it's not. And if you're just prototyping, it's just a way of doing it. So what I'll do quickly now is I will stop presenting and I'll open it up to everybody to jump in. They can turn their mics on. Have you got any questions? So if you can turn your mics on, that'd be good. David, you're there now and you had that problem with the spaghetti. I've got your mic turned on. Things that I just talked about then, did they make any sense?
Yeah, definitely. When you spoke about the trunk not touching the bed, I did put some supports on the belly, which the belly I'd sent a pic through before, and the belly did form, but I could see your belly that dropped out. Yeah,
it's just sort of looking at those. When you first sort of posted it and you sort of put that in, there are times when you get a print, it'll print beautifully for a little bit, and all of a sudden it'll go to spaghetti. And you do find you get a shift in the Z-axis occasionally, which can happen with STLs that have got some issues in them. So sometimes you've just got to play with it. But the elephant definitely needs supports, and I would just go auto supports with tree, give that a go. That ring, though, is not going to stick.
No, okay, yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I thought that might have been a problem. Yep.
So go and use a brim. And the brim is in, when you do the start slicing, it's in the additions section.
Right, okay, yep.
And I go brim, and as a last resort, I go raft. I hate using rafts because they're just a waste of filament. But for something like that little ring that you had, you definitely need need a brim.
Right, awesome.
Anyone else got some questions that they want to ask? Any issues they've had?
Danielle has no mic. She might need to write the answer question in the chat.
Yeah, throw the chat in. Danielle, I've made you a presenter, so you should be able to turn on your mic up the top right. So you're the one who I think you were talking to Anwar with a print job that got completely stuck. You left it over the holidays or something. That was an interesting one. I've never had that problem. The build plate on the Adventurer 4 can stick really well. So you've got the two ends of it. Sometimes it sticks so well it's like the proverbial to a blanket. Again, use the flex technique. You can use some water, but you usually will find that you just have to try and pry the little scraper knife, turn it over so you've got the sharpest edge, and then very carefully, do not let a kid do it. Very carefully, just get under one little edge. But again, when the print comes off and it's warm is the best time to remove it. If you've printed overnight, you come in, sometimes they're a little bit harder to get off. But most of the time when they cool down, they shrink slightly and it actually comes off almost by itself. So your little issue was an interesting one. It's a matter of persistence. Heat the bed up again, I think, is what ended up working for you, Danielle. And it then just gave it enough flexibility or difference in the two bodies. One was expanding a bit more and then it can crack off. But yeah, it's one of those wacky little challenges that occasionally you get stuck with. If that ever happens and you just can't get it off, get on the MTA and get them to send you out a new build plate, would be the other way that I would be asking that one. Any other questions? Yep, we got it in there. Excellent. Well, we eventually ended up with a solution. Again, if you've got any major problems or you run into it, let everybody know as well. Throw them in the chat, get in touch with me. I'm trying to be a bit of a first level support because we don't have Bilby on board anymore. And MTA is ramping itself up with solutions, but we're going to try and intervene as much as we can. And I'm actually doing a visit out to a school next Tuesday. I think I'm going out just up the road here to give them a hand with a few of their printers. So I think we'll call that a day today. And what I want you to do, if you've got any specific questions, weird and wonderful ones is what I want, please put them in the chat and I will address them each week when we're doing it. Now, an announcement that I do have to make, I am going to move the Wednesday webinar to Tuesday afternoon. It was pretty close on the little survey that I put out, and Tuesdays are working out better for my timetable that I'm using myself at the moment. So the recordings seem to be the way most people are getting the information. They're going back and having a look later on. And if you need anything that you want me to post on the website, etc., please just put it in the comments and I will get through to it and get them up as soon as I can. So thank you very much for today for attending and for all of those of you that will be watching later on. And we'll see you next week for 3D Print Doctor on Tuesday next week. See you then.